Hey dudes, this is B Junior from Endurance Productions YouTube channel, here hanging out in B Junior's movie cave. That's right. Gonna do a little retrospective for you today, or a mini retrospective, we'll say it that way, on a trio of sci-fi action cheesy movies from the 80s and early 90s. These are movies that I had my first experience with them at the local video store, as with many of people of my age and generation, and many of you guys out there. You found your first movies a lot of the time. If it wasn't at the theaters, it was at your local video store where you rented your VHS tapes before the days of DVD and Blu-ray and everything that's going on now, even Laserdisc too for that matter, as Laserdiscs were usually too expensive at the time. There was a lot of movies out there that found their audience on the VHS shelves. That's right, guys. We'll go back in time. I'll tell you a little backstory on this. My mother and I, we used to frequent the local video stores a lot. And that was the kind of the joy of the video store. Sometimes it was kind of like you were, well, not really gambling, but you were playing the slot machine of videos or something. Sometimes you just get a movie that you never even heard of, and it would turn out to be the greatest thing since sliced bread. The next time you get a movie, you'd lose. It wouldn't be that great at all, and you just take it back and you never saw it again. There's a little bone in me that deep down inside here that really loves some sci-fi action cheese or some sci-fi cheesy movies. One day in the late 80s, we rented this movie because of the main actor in the movie. His name is Tim Thomerson, and if you know the name, he's one of those character actors that's been around for decades, and he looks practically the same every year after year after year. He's one of those Highlander kind of guys that just immortal. He never ages, it seems like. It's kind of like Tom Atkins or some of these other guys that just look basically the same as they did in the 80s. But he's been around for decades, and he's still working even today. I checked his IMDb. If you don't know his name or know who he is, if he's one of those character actors, if you saw his face, you would know who he is. You'd be like, oh, that guy, that's who he is. Tim Thomerson did, I believe, a trio of movies. I don't think they went anything past part 3. I think they did 3 of them total. I happened upon a DVD set of all 3 movies in the Trancers series. That's right, Trancers 1, 2, and 3. All in this nice neat little multi-pack. Fellas, we picked up the original Trancers there at the local video store, as I was saying before. We took it home, and I guess we were just in the mood to see some science fiction. And my mother, she used to sit and watch these movies. I used to subject her to all kinds of horror movies, science fiction comedies, 80s comedies, all kinds of stuff like that. And God bless her, we sat there and we watched Trancers, and we enjoyed it. It's one of those Charles Band movies of the mid to late 80s. He directed the first 2 movies, and I believe the third movie was directed by C. Courtney Joyner. And we're not doing full-on reviews to anything today. This is kind of a video in the style of my thoughts on, where I just kind of tell you my basic thoughts on the Trancers trilogy. Oddly enough, Helen Hunt, this was one of her first movies, and she does appear in all 3 movies. Probably more so the first 2. The third one, she makes kind of an oversized or a glorified cameo. She has some lines, but she's not really in it that much. I think by that time in the early to mid 90s, her career started to kind of skyrocket upwards, and she was just kind of phoning in a performance on that one. But Helen Hunt does show up in these movies, and I especially love her in the first movie because of her hairstyle, her 80s hairstyles, the different colors and stuff. And Tim Thomerson was at the height of his character acting career about that point, doing all kinds of science fiction, comedy, and all kinds of wild stuff he was into. Just to name a few, he was Doll Man, for crying out loud, and he was in I think it was Metal Storm, the destruction of Jared Sin. That comes to mind. That's another schlocky science fiction movie he was in. Trancers, though, we rented this movie. It was rated PG-13. And all 3 of these movies are not very long. The first one is 77 minutes. The second one is 88 minutes. The third one is 75 minutes. So they're not really vast time needed to invest in the Trancers movies. They're not going to beat everybody's taste, for that matter. It's mainly, if you like Roger Corman style of science fiction movies, the cheap science fiction movies, you're going to like these. They do have some decent gimmicks in it, and they do have some good creative teams behind them. And most notably, the first things that come to mind, the first Trancers movie has special effects by John Carl Buechler, who's kind of a one of the go-to guys in the world of science, or excuse, world of special effects. He directed Friday the 13th Part 7, The New Blood, and he's just been in and around the special effects business for ages. I mean, he's one of those guys like Tom Savini that's been in it forever, and everybody kind of knows who they are. Trancers 3, if I remember correctly, that was one of the beginning stages of KMB effects. They did the special effects on that one. They're kind of far and few between in the third one. It had, I would guess, the lowest budget of all three, and there's not too much in it going on, but like bullet squibs and stuff like that, some monster masks and stuff like that, and the Trancers, facial makeups and stuff like that. But it was one of the beginning KMB effects, and they were actually credited as KMB, I believe, on the opening credits. Greg Nicotero and all those guys. Basically, a rundown on the story for the Trancers films. Let's kind of get into that, since this is kind of the laid-back, my thoughts on, or Trancers retrospective. We'll start with the first one, going chronologically there. It's basically, at its core, guys, it's the ultimate science fiction cheese cult classic. I mean, there are some great character actors sprouted, speckled, throughout this movie. They have all these people that you probably don't know their names, but you know their faces. You can tell this was a movie that was just kind of like a fly-by-night, grab however many actors you can, throw them in a scene for a couple of days, and make a movie. That was kind of the attitude you get out of this movie. It starts out, and his character name is hilarious too. His name is Jack Death, D-E-T-H, Jack Death. Yeah, that's his name. It's just hilarious. He's basically, it starts off, he's in the future. He's like in the year 2247, I believe it is, in Los Angeles, or Angel City as they call it. He basically is battling disciples of a bad guy named Whistler. The disciples are basically what gives the title to the series, Trancers. Whistler trances these people into becoming like mindless zombie minions of his little, to do his evil doings or whatever. And Jack Death is kind of like, in the opening scenes of the first one, is like a total rip-off of Blade Runner. From the neon signs to his garb that he's wearing, his outfit. His hair is just like Harrison Ford. Oh man, it's just like the whole opening 10-minute scene, I guess, is like totally stolen from Blade Runner. But you can tell by watching this movie that it doesn't take itself too seriously, and it really, the people that's making this movie they're just having a good time. And that's what I like about it. Plus, it's got that little special nostalgic place in my heart whenever I watch these movies, especially the first two. They were really the ones I watched a lot on video growing up. And I mean, there's laser guns, and there's all kinds of little gimmicks in there. There's decent special effects as far as the Trancer makeups and stuff of that nature, and there's good comedy, and at least especially the first two. The third one's tries to be a little more serious, but the first two, directed by Charles Band, they have some decent comedy, and it doesn't, like I said, it didn't take itself too seriously, and you can't take it seriously. I mean, you just can't when you're watching this movie. But to move it along here, guys, he's like a Blade Runner-esque kind of guy who's tracking down these Trancers and killing them, basically, or taking them to justice. And whenever it comes to that, he finds that Whistler has went back in time to modern-day 1985 Los Angeles. And whenever he did that, he is charged by the elders of the, kind of like the leadership of the future, to go back and find him and take him out, or bring him back up the line or back down the line. Is kind of their lingo that they say when they talk about the future travel, or traveling through the future and the past and all that. The one thing that they do really interesting, their time travel in these three movies that they do differently than your Back to the Future, your Terminator movies and things like that. Instead of actually physically taking that person from the future and moving them back, they trace bloodlines through informational sources to find out where their lasting relatives were of the same genealogy back in that year. They find a close relative of genetic information back to I don't know how they exactly do it, and they don't really explain it. You don't need to have an explanation. it's just cool. You know, you just watch it for the sheer cheesy enjoyment. What they do is they hook you up to a machine in the future, a la Matrix style, basically, and transfer your essence or your soul back to that relative that you had in 1985, and then do the old flip flop. They bring that person back up there and house it in a machine, and then you get transferred to your old or to your relative's body back in that time frame, and which looks exactly like Tim Thomerson, mainly because he's playing the same role, except in the future he has darker hair and his scar on his face. Whenever he gets transported back down the line to 1985, he takes over the body of a journalist relative that lives in the LA area or something like that as the backstory. They can transport objects back, though, a la Terminator. They transport him back a revolver that has like secret darts that are supposed to inject into this Whistler guy that will put him in a sleep and bring him back to the future or whatever. And also they give him what's the coolest gag in at least the first two movies is his wristwatch. They call it the long second, I believe it is, where he can, like if someone's going to shoot him or they're in a spot of trouble, he can hit his wristwatch and it slows down 1 second of time and stretches it to about 10 or 15 seconds. And then sort of like Bionic Man style, he like runs around while everybody else is kind of about frozen in time and apprehending people, getting out of the way of bullets and stuff like that. So that's kind of the most favorite gag that I remember from watching these. It was just kind of fun back then. It's kind of goofy to watch now, but it's kind of nostalgic at the same time. It's kind of like that same old thing whenever you watch Dukes of Hazzard. You loved it when you were a kid, but now when you watch it, you're kind of like, this just isn't the same, but you need to watch it every once in a while to kind of feel good again. I don't know, feel nostalgic about it. That's the basic gist of the first one. I won't ruin the ending for you, but check it out if that's your thing. If you've never seen Trancers and you're into science fiction cheese, shame on you. Go rent it, Netflix it, find it, watch it. Trancers 2 picks up in 1991, and I believe it was a straight-to-video sequel because I don't remember having a theatrical run on it. It's rated R. I think by then the MPAA got a little bit more strict on horror movies, so this one's not PG-13. But it still has that lighthearted nature, and it has actually just about every single character actor and anybody that was involved with the first one makes another appearance in part 2. And for a low-budget movie of this kind, that is hard to do. I mean, if you watch other movies of the same budgetary constraints, that's hard to do because people usually in actor land, they go off to other projects and don't really have time to come back and do films or sequels of that nature. It's basically not so much a rehash, but it's just the Trancers show up again in part 2, and he and Helen Hunt have moved on. They've gotten married, and it's just hijinks ensue. Basically, it's got about the same. It's got the action factor in part 2 is amped up. It's more of an action film. There's a lot more gun battles in that one. They've upgraded from revolvers to automatic pistols, and things like that are just kind of notable in that movie. And it's about the same decent experience as the first one. That's really all I can say about Trancers 2. It's just one of those that you really have, after you watch part 1, you're kind of like, dude, I wonder what part 2's like. And you just put it in and you have to watch it too. Trancers 3, while we're doing this here retrospective on the trilogy here, Trancers 3, I had watched it one time when the big VHS boom was going on, and then I haven't revisited it until this multi-pack that I got in the mail. I put it in, I watched them all three chronologically over a couple of days worth of time. Trancers 3 is probably my least favorite of the, I'm not going to say it's a bad movie. It's just as cheesy. It's got K&B effects in it. It's got more of they try to be a little more serious in this one. You can tell there's a different direction style to it. Charles Band is one of the producers, but he's not directing this one. It does have Helen Hunt in a small kind of oversized cameo role, but it's basically they bring him back up to the future, and they have to do a lot of future battle in this one too to make the past right this time. It's kind of the flip flop of the first two movies. So it's just one of those that to be a completist, to be a Trancers fan, you got to watch part 3 every once in a while. That's kind of really the rundown on the story of all of these guys. If I remember correctly, it's been about a week since I've took in these viewings of these films. The first movie, sadly, it's in full screen, but it's a clean full screen version of the movie. It did look pretty good. Um, it's got a 2.0 stereo mix. Trancers 2, if memory serves, was the only one in widescreen out of this triple pack, and it looks the best because when you watch part 2, you feel like there's not a whole lot more, but there's a better budget in that one as far as pyrotechnics go and things like that. So it's naturally going to look a little bit better in film stock probably. Trancers 3 is kind of a back to basics, more low budget approach. The the story, the trilogy is starting to show its age a little bit too, so it's also in full screen. It's probably not the best looking of all three, but it's watchable. You can get the job done, and it's nice to have them all three in a nice, neat little collection like this. So as far as nostalgia goes, and just a good old time with science fiction action cheese, I'm going to go ahead and give it the B. West Jr. seal of approval, but I'm biased because this is one of my childhood favorites. So try it out, guys. See if it's if you like Roger Corman movies, things like Star Crash and what are some of the other ones? Battle Truck and Death Sport and all those kind of movies. You might want to give Trancers a try. You might like it. Netflix it first. If you're not really into that type of movie, try it out. See if it's your cup of tea. But if you're down with science fiction cheese, go buy it. Highly recommend seal of approval if you're that type of person. This trilogy comes to me from Echo Bridge Home Entertainment. I did get a little shipment of these movies recently, and I'm so glad I included this one on the list because the wonderful folks over there, they shipped me a set of these, and it was really nice not only for my own personal wants to go back and revisit these, but also a lot of people have been commenting wanting to know what I thought about Trancers and Tim Thomerson's roles in movies and stuff. So if you guys have been asking me those questions, this retrospective video is dedicated to you guys. Definitely thanks for bringing up this great subject. So it's been a good ride. This does all three of these movies are produced by Full Moon Pictures, but the DVD set here is released there again by Echo Bridge Entertainment. I'll leave a link in the info section below, and you can pick it up at their website for pretty cheap. But I hear tell these are going to be out the stores soon. They're going to be out if they're not already. Check out your local Kmart's, Walmart's. They should have these, and it shouldn't break your bank too much. I believe they're under $10. So there you have it, guys. The retrospective, I've blabbed on enough. Get out there and get your Trancers fixed, guys, and enjoy it. This is B. Junior's Movie Cave signing off for now. Take care, dudes, and I'll see you next time.